It's very awkward right now. I feel like there's something really wrong. And I don't know, maybe he's hiding something, or maybe...
He looked Laura dead in the eyes and said, "This is my life. Not like this is the life I want or this is temporary. No. This is my actual daily routine." He sits at a shisha caf, smokes for hours, chats with the staff like they're his roommates, and somehow thinks this counts as a lifestyle. Not a job, not a plan, just vibes. And the kicker? He presented it like it was some kind of flex. Like, look where I bring my women. Laura wasn't even fully seated at the table before her expression shifted. This isn't culture. This isn't rest. This is avoidance, dressed in tobacco smoke. And while Birkan lit the shisha and acted like a local celebrity in this clouded bubble of denial, Laura tried to make sense of what she was seeing. This is the man who promised her depth, maturity, a serious life partner ready for marriage. Not a man whose social circle was the CAF staff and whose biggest daily decision was double apple or mint flavor. Every inch of his body language screamed comfortable, and not in a wholesome way. Comfortable as in, I've been doing this every single day for so long, I don't even feel like hiding it anymore. Laura didn't need to ask how often he came here. She already knew from the way the waiter smiled like they were on the third group date of the week. When Birkan pointed to his usual table, she flinched. How does someone so jobless, so rootless, have a regular seat like this is his office? And still, Birkan smiled like this was the part where she'd be impressed. When she pushed lightly, asking about future plans or how he affords a daily hookah, Birkan shrugged. He said it helps him cope. Get this, he said it's his medicine. As if self-prescribed shisha therapy is going to clear $50,000 in debt. She didn't laugh. She didn't cry either. She just went quiet. Which is worse. Because Laura wasn't just seeing a red flag. She was watching the man she wanted to believe in turn into the exact opposite of everything he claimed to be. No job, no ambition, no apology. Only smoke, everywhere. He didn't seem worried she might walk away. He seemed confident she wouldn't. That's what hit hardest. He acted like he could get away with this too. Like she'd cave, again, like she always does. If this was his big reveal, imagine what he still hasn't said. Rewind just 24 hours earlier, and the cracks were already splitting wide open. The day started with blue skies and beads, literally. Birkan and Laura were sitting in a tiny Turkish hut, surrounded by handmade evil eye charms, trying to enjoy a cultural bonding experience that should have been lighthearted. But it turned sharp fast. Birkan wasn't looking at her. He was looking through her. And then, out of nowhere, came the ultimatum. Out of the blue, mid-conversation, he snapped. Either she cuts off her best friend Michael, or this relationship doesn't move forward. No lead up, no context. Just drop him. And for what? Because Michael was the one person in her life asking the hard questions Birkan refused to answer? Michael didn't like him. And Birkan hated that. But what he couldn't stand even more was the fact that Laura trusted someone else's opinion more than his. So Birkan did what insecure men often do when their mask starts to slip. He framed control as care. He said he was protecting Laura. He said Michael was a threat. Not to her safety, to his image. When Laura tried to get a word in, when she pointed out that no healthy relationship starts with isolating your partner from the one person who supported her through everything, Birkan walked out. Literally stormed off, leaving her alone in a hut, confused, embarrassed, and spinning. And Laura, bless her heart, still tried to empathize. She followed him, asked him if he was okay, and tried reasoning. That's what's wild. She tried to make him feel better while he iced her out and refused to even acknowledge her perspective. He told her, "I don't want to talk about Michael anymore." Translation? End of discussion. Doesn't matter what you feel. Doesn't matter that he made you cry in public for the second time in 3 days. It's over. Because he says so. And this is where things got darker quietly. Because when Laura tried to explain herself calmly, when she gently asked how he could leave her like that just for mentioning her friend, he didn't apologize or explain. He doubled down. Said, Michael wasn't just a friend. Said he had feelings. Which isn't untrue, but weaponizing that at this moment? Cold. He pushed her into a corner. Keep your best friend or keep your relationship. He knew that choice would paralyze her. Not because she's weak, but because this is how control works. Slowly. One boundary at a time. And she almost fell for it. Again. The moment they walked into the cafe, it was clear this wasn't just a hangout spot for Birkan. This was home. The kind of home where your name's been written into the furniture and the staff greet you like your family. Not one employee looked surprised to see him. A few even looked at Laura like she was the new one. That said more than he ever has. He didn't even scan the place. He walked straight to a table, the table that he called his, as if he pays rent on it. He didn't pause to check if Laura felt comfortable there. He didn't even offer a seat with a better view. This was his zone, and she was stepping into it. Laura took it in slowly, the friendliness, the familiarity, the way the workers lit his shisha before he even sat down. She smiled, but her eyes drifted. Why was he here so often? How was he affording shisha like it's part of his health plan? And why did everyone act like she'd walked into his place wrapped around him, not standing beside him? Then came the friends. 2 men, both polite, both energetic. They greeted Laura warmly and asked about her trip, picking up where Birkan left off. It was nice. But it was also performative, because the second Laura asked if they could tell her more about Birkan, not the version he presents, but who he really is, the air changed. At first, the answers were sweet. He's strong, loyal, honest. But underneath the compliments, there were hesitations. Long pauses, side glances. The kind people make when they're trying to say something without saying it. Laura leaned in. She wanted more. The way Birkan had acted lately? She needed more. And here's where the whole setup cracked in real time. The friends began talking in Turkish. Clearly. About Birkan. About his habits. His behavior. His choices. At first, Birkan translated. Then, he just stopped. He stared. Gave them a look that could ice over glass. It was obvious. They knew things Laura didn't. He knew they might say it. And he was terrified. Laura sat there, watching a conversation she couldn't understand with people she'd just met about a man she thought she already knew. She watched the tension grow. She saw the fear slip into Birkan's body as he leaned forward. Eyes locked onto his friends' faces like a silent warning. And in that moment, she realized he wasn't afraid of her reaction. He was afraid the truth might slip. Across the table, Laura was still trying to make sense of the tension. The smiles had thinned. The friendliness felt forced. And Birkan, once animated, was suddenly quiet, his eyes darting between his friends and the hookah pipe like he was begging it for help. But behind the scenes, away from Laura's ears, he was unfolding the real story. Not to her. To the producers. Looking into the camera without a hint of shame, Birkan admitted something that changed the entire game. He said he gambles for a living. He said it plainly, like he was applying for a position, not confessing a life-altering secret. No job, no consistent income, no house. All he has is debt, and roulette dreams convincing him he's just one bet away from turning it all around. Then came the number, $50,000. That's how much he owes. And this wasn't to a student loan, a car finance plan, or some mix-up with a credit card. This was the kind of debt you don't casually recover from. You carry it. You suffer it. And unless you have a miracle or a very forgiving woman, you don't escape it. Meanwhile, sitting across from him, Laura sips her drink, still in the dark, still thinking this guy might just be stuck in a rough patch, still imagining their future as something they both build, without realizing he sees her as the exit plan, not a partner, a rescue. His friends had seen this pattern before. That much was clear. And this time they weren't trying to protect Birkan. They were trying to warn Laura, not with malice, with concern. The kind that sounds like, he's not telling her everything. This will explode later. They told him gently. He had to be honest, at least before things went further, before she moved mountains for someone who hadn't even built a bridge of honesty. But Birkan froze. He said he didn't want to pressure her. The man who handed out ultimatums like candy couldn't handle someone asking him to tell the truth. It wasn't that he didn't know how. He just thought if he waited long enough, maybe he wouldn't have to. Maybe she'd never ask. It might have worked too. If Laura hadn't seen the way his expression changed when the topic turned serious, if the camera crew hadn't caught him staring down his own friends like they were traitors, she thought she was coming here to meet a man. But what if all along she was being vetted for the role of debt sponge? You're pushing my will. That's what he said. Calm. Flat. Like it was a warning, not a sentence. Not loud, not angry, just chilling. The kind of phrase that silences a room, not because it's violent, but because it's loaded. It was subtle. And that made it scarier. He didn't say she was wrong. He didn't say he was hurt. He didn't say anything that made space for her feelings. He just issued a coded threat. A quiet alarm signaling that if she kept pressing, something was going to snap. And even in that moment, Laura still chose peace. She tried to gently shift the energy. She didn't want to fight. She didn't want another scene. So, what did she do? She tried to find a middle ground. She asked nervously if Birkan would consider a compromise. He'd met her, shared his world, sat beside her friends. Couldn't he do the same? Couldn't he, at least once, be open to talking to Michael? Not even a full meetup. A call. A basic conversation. Something that shows mutual respect. Or even basic effort. But Birkan didn't budge. He didn't ask why that was important to her. He didn't even acknowledge how hard it was for her to bring it up again after the way he'd stormed off the last time. He just hit the wall again. No. Discussion over. Now imagine this. You've flown across the world to meet the person you think you love. You're sleeping in his country, breathing in his culture, speaking in the fragments of his language. And you ask one thing in return. And what you get is a refusal wrapped in emotional dismissal. And yet, somehow, Laura pushed a smile. Not a full-hearted, joyful one. More like a mask. She kept pretending it was all fine. Pretending this wasn't becoming a pattern. Pretending he didn't keep shutting down every attempt she made to reconnect as equals. That's where the emotional gaslighting creeps in. Quietly. Subtly. Consistently. Because Birkan doesn't have to raise his voice or insult her directly to make her feel foolish. He just has to keep acting like his reactions are normal, and hers are dramatic. He gets to sulk, storm out, glare, and emotionally withdraw. And when she pushes back, she's the one rocking the boat. So now, she's doing emotional math in her head, calculating which truths are worth saying out loud, and which ones will just trigger another shutdown. Choosing her words with caution. Playing small. And yet, his friends keep trying to smooth it over. They lean in, reassure her. Say there's a softer side to Birkan. That he has what they call a dark part. But he also has love. A caring nature. That he could be a good partner if she sees the full picture. But here's the question. Should anyone need to work this hard to interpret basic respect? One of his friends even says it out loud. There's a version of Birkan Laura hasn't seen yet. A side he keeps hidden. As if that's not a massive flashing sign with GPS coordinates pointing toward emotional disaster. Laura's face twitches slightly. She smiles like she wants to accept it. Like the hope she packed into her suitcase is still intact. But the smile doesn't reach her eyes. Because somewhere deep inside, she knows it. The doubts aren't whispers anymore. They're forming sentences. And she keeps pivoting, avoiding the confrontation, telling herself maybe he's just stressed, or misunderstood, or bad with English. Tiny excuses that become survival tools when you're emotionally invested and scared to lose everything you thought this relationship might be. She's not blind. She's scared. She's protecting a version of the relationship that doesn't truly exist anymore, if it ever did to begin with. And that's the darkest part about gaslighting. It doesn't erase your memories. It just corrupts your instincts. He looked her in the eyes and lied without blinking. What would you do if this was your partner? This moment is where most people watching start yelling at the screen. Because Laura isn't a helpless victim. She's clearly intelligent, emotionally aware, and observant. But that's what makes it harder to watch. Because it's not ignorance that's keeping her here. It's hope. And isn't that how these stories survive? Not because love fixes everything, but because people hope it does. She's sitting at a table, surrounded by everyone who knows him better than she does. Listening to laughter that's covering lies. Watching her boyfriend dodge, deflect, distract. And still, she hesitates. Because leaving would mean admitting she got played. That this was never an equal relationship. That maybe even his "I love you" was a strategy, not a truth. She doesn't say these things out loud. But they play out across her face in tiny flickers. He starts stroking her arm gently the moment the questioning gets too deep. She loosens up, smiles shyly at him, and for a second, the fog rolls back in. Because that's what Birkan knows how to do. He drags her back in, again and again, not with rage, but with just enough warmth to erase the memory of how cold he was 5 minutes before. And the next loop begins. Laura knows the energy is off. She knows something is being hidden. She even says it to the camera. Words like uneasy, confused, and I think he's hiding something spill from her mouth like puzzle pieces she refuses to connect. She saw the red flag. She held it. So why isn't she waving it? There's something about the sound Michael made when he cried that Laura hasn't been able to forget. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was soft and broken. The kind of sound people make when they're watching someone choose pain in real time. That goodbye wasn't easy for him. And it shouldn't have been easy for her either, but she tucked it away. Because, in her heart, this wasn't just about a relationship. This was a chance. A shot at something real. Something different. Laura wasn't chasing a man. She was chasing a future. One where she didn't have to over-explain herself. One where there was passion and chemistry and a feeling that her emotions had a home, not just a shelf. So when she boarded that flight to Turkey, she packed more than just clothes. She packed hopes. She packed the idea that maybe this wild, slightly reckless move was going to fix something inside her. Everyone needs connection. But she needed more than that. She needed to believe that connection could be instant and passionate, even if every logical sign pointed the other way. But now she's sitting in that silent denial, the quiet space between realizing something is off and being brave enough to say it out loud. The way Birkan talks over her. The way he demands things but offers no compromise. The way he withholds truth like it's currency. None of that screams safety. And still, she stays. Not because she doesn't know better, but because she needs it to be better. That's the thing no one ever talks about, the way smart women get tangled in fantasy. We villainize them for staying, instead of understanding what they're holding onto isn't necessarily him. It's the story. The plan, the silent deal she made with herself that this was going to work. She told herself this connection was rare, that Birkan saw her in a way that others couldn't. It's not even entirely false. People like Birkan know how to look at you and make you feel like you're the only one in the world. That's how they earn access. That's how they sell the dream. And the fantasy was good. At first, it was laughter, sparks, stolen kisses under Turkish sunsets. She imagined a future where they built a small business, or maybe traveled together. The kind of love story that would prove everyone wrong, especially the people who tried to protect her. But something's been shifting, quietly, painfully. Birkan's words don't land the same anymore. His anger isn't passionate, it's threatening. His silence isn't mysterious, it's avoidance. And every time she laughs off her gut feeling, it comes back twice as loud later. Still, she keeps clinging. Because if this fails, what does that mean? That she was wrong? That Michael was right? That the people she distanced herself from had clearer vision than she did? That hurts more than heartbreak. That's ego, identity, dignity, all crumpled in one blow. So she paints over the cracks. When he stonewalls, she calls him protective. When he lies, she says maybe he forgot. When he manipulates, she tells herself he's scared too. That's how emotional survival works when the stakes feel this high. You don't leave first. You wait until the crashes are loud enough to drown out all illusion. And yet, the quiet warnings keep stacking. His friends said it. Her instincts felt it. Even the environment around them seems to echo, this is not it. A woman deeply in love doesn't need a man without flaws. But she needs one who cares more about truth than control. And that's never been Birkan. He's not building something with her. He's managing her. Keeping her close enough not to leave, but far enough not to find the truth. He's mastered that middle ground where she stays confused, too unsure to walk, yet too hopeful to run. Laura hasn't had many big wins in love. That's what makes this harder to unravel. When your dating history is full of letdowns, and someone finally chooses you this loudly, it's intoxicating. The brain doesn't register red flags the same way. It interprets effort as commitment, and dominance as protection. But some instinct in her is stirring now. Something that wasn't awake before. She caught herself flinching when he raised his tone. She noticed the weight in her chest every time he changed the subject. She's suddenly hyper-aware of how much she has to minimize herself to keep him calm. That's not what love is. That's survival. Still, when she's sitting in the car with him looking quiet, or when he reaches for her hand after being colder than winter 20 minutes earlier, she tells herself, no relationship is perfect. Love is messy. People are human. She's convincing herself through cracks in logic. The heartbreak isn't even about him anymore. It's about the fantasy burning down slowly in front of her face. The image she constructed of who he was, the life they'd build, the version of herself she wanted to become next to him. And maybe the saddest part is, if Birkan ever admitted the truth, if he opened up, owned his flaws, dropped the act, Laura would forgive him. That's how generous she is, how ready she was to shape this story into something redemptive. But he won't give her that. He wants her loyalty without transparency, commitment without clarity, devotion without reality. She's twisting emotionally, still asking the same silent question, was I just wrong about everything? Maybe I don't know what love is. And yet, she knows. Somewhere inside, she knows. She's not stupid. She's scared because once you admit the truth to yourself, that someone you loved isn't who you thought they were, there's no going back. She knows it's wrong. So is she staying for him? Or the dream she built without him? The moment Birkan stopped translating, his entire face shifted. His posture stiffened, jaw tight, lips thin. He wasn't confused. He wasn't lost in thought. He was calculating. Watching. His eyes locked onto his friends like lasers, sending a message they were too used to receiving. Shut it down. And they hesitated. You could feel it in the tension that rushed the table like a cold breeze. They looked at each other, then back at Laura, then at Birkan. The silence got longer, heavier. Everyone there knew what was happening, except the one person who deserved to know the most. Laura's eyes bounced between them. She tried to stay composed, nodding politely, pretending it was a simple pause. But you could see it. Her smile tightened, her breathing slowed, her shoulders dropped an inch. The vibe had shifted, and she felt it everywhere. Something was being said that wasn't being shared. She looked at Birkan. He met her gaze, and for a second, he forgot to smile. He just stared. No warmth, no reassurance, just vacant stillness, like she was daring him to slip. And he almost did. Then, he turned to his friends, murmured something short in Turkish, a command more than a sentence. They nodded hesitantly, like they didn't want to lie, but knew the script was no longer in their hands. One of them finally spoke. He pasted on a weak grin and said in English, "Birkan doesn't like pressure." That was it. No context. No follow-up. Just that. Laura furrowed her brow. That's all? After 5 full minutes of back and forth? That's what was so dramatic? She didn't buy it. You could see it in her eyes. This wasn't a conversation about pressure. This was a carefully constructed wall of silence. They were protecting him. From what? She didn't know yet. But the vague excuses, the incomplete answers, the tension, they all gestured toward something she wasn't supposed to figure out. Not now. Maybe not ever. And then Birkan made it worse. He gave his friends that death stare again, the one that borders between intimidation and desperation. Like he's not trying to dominate them. He's begging them not to ruin the game. But the damage was already leaking through the cracks. Even Laura couldn't hold back anymore. She leaned in slightly, her hand resting on her lap, voice quiet but sharp. She asked him again, what were they saying? Same tone as before, but the innocence was gone. Now, she wanted receipts. Birkan sighed, looked down at the table, then up at her with a shrug. Nothing important, he said, with a flat tone that might as well have been screaming lie. Her silence said more than his deflection. Even the crew behind the camera probably held their breath. Because this was the moment. The one where someone usually slips. Where the truth is a sentence away. But Birkan somehow tightened his mask for one more round. Only now, everyone could see the edges fraying. The friends who once smiled openly were now focused on their drinks. Laura, once clinging to every word he said, now seemed like she was running mental simulations in her head. Trying to decide whether confronting him would give her clarity or cost her more peace than she had left. Even her body started leaning slightly away from him. Not enough to be obvious, but enough for anyone paying attention to realize she wasn't relaxing around him anymore. She was guarding herself. And that innocent question she didn't ask, "What are you hiding?" hung in the air like smoke. He's running out of lies. But she's still sitting next to him. Laura wasn't crying. Not yet. That almost made it worse. Her silence had stretched into something heavy, like the weight of everything she hadn't said was sitting in her chest now. The calf buzzed around them as usual, laughter from the next table, someone ordering tea, the hiss of shisha pipes. But inside Laura's head, it must have sounded like a fire alarm, because this was the moment. Not loud, not explosive. Quiet, cold, raw. She looked at Birkan. Really looked. For the first time, not as the boyfriend she hoped he'd be, or the protector he claimed to be, but as he was. Withdrawn. guarded, still pretending to be unbothered while the atmosphere clung with secrets. And when she asked again, gently this time, "Is there anything else I should know?" He didn't blink, didn't deflect, didn't reassure. He just said, "No, everything's fine." Deadpan. The lie sat between them like a wall they both refused to step around. Laura turned to the camera hours later, makeup still on, smile mostly gone. And what she said wasn't dramatic. It was simple, honest, and maybe the most heartbreaking line of all. "I think he's hiding more." Her voice didn't crack, but her heart did. That's when we saw it. The switch. The slow realization that all those little quirks, the controlling language, the avoidance, the secrecy, weren't personality differences. They were patterns. Pink flags that weren't soft at all, just red ones, dressed in charm. She admitted that out loud now. Not to Birkan, to herself. And here's the hardest thing about finding out the truth this late. You're not just grieving the person in front of you. You're grieving the version of yourself that believed in them. Laura looked tired. Not from the trip, but from the emotional spinning, making excuses, interpreting silences, wondering if she was paranoid or just finally waking up. And Birkan? Still calm. Still providing answers that left more questions. Still acting like none of this mattered, like she was being too sensitive, too suspicious, too everything. But something in her had already shifted. You could feel it. The tension didn't break. But the illusion did. Or at least, it cracked wide enough for the truth to start crawling in. And now, she's teetering on the edge. There's no more honeymoon glaze to hide behind. The spell is wearing off. But will she leave? Not yet. Not now. Because fear holds on just as tightly as love. She's not a fool. She's in a war with herself. One voice says leave before it gets worse. The other says, hold on a little longer. Maybe he'll change. Maybe this can still work. Because the next 24 hours decide everything. If you think this was wild, wait until she finds out what he really wants from her when the cameras leave.